Earlier this year, they were doing promotional appearances for Men in Black 3, and I had a chance to visit Rick at his studio. And one of the films that I made sure I got a chance to talk about was Harry and the Hendersons, because I figured, how often do I get the chance? Now here we are just a few months later, so it is very nice.
Shows what you know.
Yeah, exactly. I was worried for no good reason. It's a real delight to see it on the big screen and to see how really seamless Harry still looks. It is timeless. He looks amazing, and the film really holds up. Not just as an effect, but as a film on the whole. I mean, it's a really lovely family film. Can you talk about how the material came into your hands in the first place, Mr. Deere, and sort of how this developed?
Yes. Well, first I gotta say something. First,
I gotta say that the reason that Harry is because of Rick Baker. I mean, this is, you know, it's easy to write this stuff on paper, but when you take that before the age of any of the effects that we take for granted today, this is all real. Everything you saw was real. It was not a special effect on Harry that didn't come out of Rick Baker's hands, and that's you know, in this world where we can do anything, things become, you know, you expect that we can do anything. Back then, Rick did the impossible. You know, he made magic, and he brought this creature to life. So
that's I have to say that.
This is how it came to me. Is I was working with Michael Nesmith and Bill Martin, who I don't know if you're here in the audience, and if you are, you should be up here. We tried to find Bill. Bill and his partner Ezra Rappaport had written a half-hour sitcom pilot called Harry and the Hendersons, and they wanted Fred Gwynn to play Harry with light patches of hair on his face. And I mean, it was a noble idea, and I just thought to myself when I read it, I thought, this is more than a sitcom. This is a movie. This should be a movie. And I've always been fascinated with the mysterious thing. Bigfoot was always one of those great fascinations, you know. So here was a story about Bigfoot that I felt just wasn't fully realized. And so I optioned it from them and gave them the opportunity to write the first screenplay, which I then worked on with them. And because of Rick's work and what had been done with Werewolf and other 8 things, Rick was the only one to go to. And I remember I had 40 pages of the draft, and like a stalker, I knocked on Rick's door with a little statue of Harry's head in my hand, introduced myself, and said I only had 40 pages of a screenplay. And I'm talking to like the maestro, and I'm just the guy he's wondering, like, I wonder how far the police are. And I remember he said, no, I can't do this. But I was persistent, so that's all I got to say. And I'm so grateful that Rick did do it, because he's the only one who could have brought Harry to life. But that's how the idea came, and we developed it into a screenplay. Rick said yes.
Yeah, and I remember Bill coming and really sweet talking me. And I was really liking all the things he was saying. You know, he said, you know, I think you're the only person in the world that can do this, and you give your characters a soul. You know, and I liked that somebody thought that anyway. You know, whether it was bullshit or not. But
it's only partly bullshit.
Yeah. But I mean, he came to me before he had a deal with a studio or anything, and he gave me some money to do a design, which was the drawing that they used in the picture that was John Lithgow's, supposedly John Lithgow's drawing, and you know, it started there. And I mean, so I mean, thank you, Bill.
You're right.
Yes, I always say this is one of the favorite things I've done. My favorite character, and one I'm most proud of.
Well, and the thing that I find so fascinating watching the film is you never once think about the process that brings him to life. The eyes, the performance. He always seems like he is completely engaged as any other actor on the set. And yet knowing that you guys had to not only coordinate with Kevin Peter Hall, who is such an important part of bringing to life physically, but then to puppeteer the face and to be able to coordinate all of that with the performances of the other actors, it seems like really a magic trick in almost every shot.
Yeah, well, I think we were really lucky. There was a lot that came involved in this too. But I mean, first of all, Kevin, you know, it makes me so sad to watch this, you know, and it really made me miss Kevin a lot. He did bring so much to it. And when Bill first talked to me, I said, you know, the first person I thought of was Kevin, because I worked with Kevin once before. In fact, I got him his first job, and it was for a film called Without Warning, and I said I wanted to be involved in the casting, and they had a open casting call, and this 7'2" black guy comes in who could act, you know, and it was like, I want that guy, you know, and Kevin and I became fast friends, because he was like right off the bus from Philadelphia, or was from, I forgot. And I liked having a friend that was a giant. But Kevin was on at the time that we were starting up, was on a TV series called Mysteries of Science, and he didn't have to wear makeup and a costume. He was quite happy about that. And he wasn't available, and besides he said, I'm not gonna wear these costumes anymore, and here like little Rick Baker's like looking at Kevin and going, you're making a big mistake, you should be doing this, is gonna be a really great part, and you'll be so good for it, but he wasn't available. And I remember those casting calls at Amblin, we met like every giant person in the world, and there was that one guy that was like 7'9" or whatever the hell he was. He was like unbelievable. It was like huge, but I mean, it took so long for the information to get from his brain to his feet. It was all like plus, but I mean, we actually started the movie with somebody else, with this guy named John Bloom, because Kevin wasn't available. And fortunately for us, Misfits of Science got canceled, and Kevin became available. I said, I'll start again to get Kevin. I'm so thankful we had Kevin. He was such a wonderful guy and so great in the movie.
And now there are 3 of you credited as puppeteers, so you guys must have been right there in terms of working with you and working with Lithgow and working with Kevin. How do you coordinate a scene just to bring that performance to life?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was hard. I mean, this was the first time we ever made a radio-controlled head. I mean, before that, it was cable controls and stuff, and I knew from the demands of the script, I mean, I think, Bill even gave me like a breakdown of like 57 different expressions that he had to make, and because of, the Bigfoot sightings, and he's always kind of said they have a kind of a big head. I thought we could put the motors right there, but this was, very early on in the days of radio control stuff, and we had just the regular joysticks. It was myself and Tom Hester and Tim Lawrence puppeteered the thing, and Kevin could open and close the mouth and the eyes. It was tricky because for some reason Jim Bissell, when we made the Hendersons' house, didn't have wild walls, and it was like so much of the movie took place in a kitchen, and it was in like a normal middle-class home-sized kitchen, and with two crab dollies and camera lights, 2 camera operators, all the crews in there, the C-stands, and Tom and Tim and I with our little remote control things trying to get in someplace where we could actually see Kevin and not be in the shot. And we didn't have like headphones to communicate, and it was just magic happened. I mean, the 4 of us became this one character somehow magically.
It's funny because one of the craziest moments I've witnessed recently was last year at Comic-Con at the Cowboys and Aliens premiere. And you were sitting in front of us about 5 rows up, and we saw you talking with Andy Serkis. And you can't help but wonder, this is, the one technology meeting the new technology, but the performance, the philosophy is still the same, which is it's a team of people to bring one performance to life. And it does become a coordinated effort. Did you see a learning curve over the course of the production? Did you get to where it became somewhat shorthanded and you got easier?
Yeah, Kevin was pretty easy to read for what he was going to do, and we somehow just, like I said, it was magic, but every day we'd go to see dailies at lunchtime, and we'd eat our lunch and watch dailies, and I remember just watching John Lithgow, and he's so expressive and so great in the movie, and I think we picked up a lot of stuff from John as well. But it was, there were so many times, we do like a master shot, and then like I'd run over to Kevin and say, we're going to make, because he didn't know what his face was doing, and we're going to make this face, or just make a face, and then I'd run to Tom and I run to Tim, and a lot of times we were just going like this with the controllers, just having to work.
And now, as a director, there's that huge leap of faith that happens on that set where you have a guy like Lithgow who's going to give you a certain something, and then you're trying to capture this magical moment. Were there moments of frustration? Were there times where you were like, I can't believe I got myself into this? Or did you start to see it come together as you saw the dailies and realize, I am getting magic here?
I did with my eyes closed. No, let me preface that with one thing. Rick and I had come to a decision early on that no matter what the creature, Rick said that, Rick said that, his creatures have soul, and his creatures do have soul. one of the things that we decided on early on was to, and Rick did this masterfully, design the makeup around Kevin's real eyes, so we had real eyes. That was one of the things. If this creature had mechanical eyes, I think we'd have never gone inside, Kevin Peter Hall or Bigfoot's soul, Harry's soul. So that's a tribute to Rick's design. That's one of the real magic of that whole thing, is that it really is, except for the color context, you're seeing, real human eyes, so no matter how much Bigfoot was around the humanity, the door to let you in was real eyes, and I think that was it. And I would be as amazed as everybody was when Rick and those guys would work, and they were regular model airplane controllers, and they would work these controllers, and that face would come to life, and Kevin's movements would come to life. And, it was quite amazing. It wasn't too hard to make the leap of faith. I mean, because it was magic. It was magic happening in the room with you, and the studio wanted, once they started to put their marketing into it and everything else, they wanted, like, well, why John Lithgow? He's so tall. How about Danny DeVito? And then it became a whole different kind of movie with, like, giant Bigfoot, a little tiny guy. And Lithgow's 6'4", and it was still amazing. I am constantly amazed how much bigger Harry's head is, and just, even though Harry only is sometimes less than a foot taller than John, he still seems just massively towering over at all times.
That shot of them at the table with Amici, once Harry settles down to eat, you realize just the scale of him, because he's only from here up, and he's bigger than Amici, almost entirely. And then you complicate things by you have a young actor in there, you have a dog on the set. I mean, you really couldn't have set a higher challenge for yourself. In terms of
Both are really good, weren't they?
they're great. I mean, they again effortlessly make that feel like it's alive and real. When you're shooting on a location, this seems like one of the philosophies of makeup, at least in the early days, was hide things in the dark. And now the introduction of Harry certainly happens in shadows, and we get it in stages. But you have scenes where you're outside in brightly lit, sunlight and things, and you still have to sell the reality of him. Was there ever anything that gave you trouble with the location shooting, or were those things that you had worked out enough that once you got there, it came together?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to make stuff that looks good if you stand really close to it. So I mean, it wasn't that much of a problem. I mean, we actually started it on location, didn't we?
Yeah.
That stuff that's kind of at the end of the movie and stuff where you're out there, and it was some of the first stuff we did. And I think one thing that did happen is I actually originally had it a little darker around his eyes the way he was made up, and Alan Davio was saying I think you should put lighter makeup on him just because they're kind of shaded with the heavy brown and stuff. But no, I mean it was Harry looked pretty good no matter
I was thinking Davio is one of the guys that defines, for me anyway, what the 80s felt like on film. I think his work was so iconic in terms of setting a certain tone. How much of a collaborator is he in bringing a character like this to life?
Amazingly big character. I mean, he had just come off 2 Academy Award nominations, and he was Steven Spielberg's guy, and we were lucky enough to get him for the movie. He, because of his desire to be a perfectionist, he would sometimes frustrate the actors with the time he took. But it is his look. It is that look that kind of signifies the 80s. And some of the critics of the film, would say it's too close to that. It came out of Steven Spielberg's shop, but they said it was too close to his look. Well, we had his cameraman, and we all look up and do look up to Steven. So yeah, it's going to look a little bit that way.
Well, and that's one thing, is being under the banner of Amblin. I would imagine at that point in the 80s, that meant something in terms of the way the studio treated you, or in terms of once you landed the film at Amblin, since it did not start there, was there a different level of support? Did you guys really feel like once you were there, you were able to make the film that you set out to make?
I think we thought that, and then there was realities where you'd get a tap on the shoulder and said, Sid Sheinberg, who was the president of Universal, would like you to come to his office at lunch. And you go, what's that for? And then you come back in the afternoon, you've just been told you're 3 days behind. But and to Rick's credit, we weren't behind because of Harry. We weren't behind because of the time it took to suit Kevin up or put the head on. I mean, that was one of the, another part of Rick's genius, is that he cares, he has a compassion for the actor who is gonna have to wear that suit in hot lights, 8, 10 hours a day. And I remember they could get Kevin in and out of his head maybe in less than 15 minutes, all buttoned up and ready to go. And it really was a relief for the actor, because if we knew a setup was gonna take, longer than 10 or 15 minutes, Rick and guys would pop Kevin's head off, and Kevin would be able to, breathe and be a real human for a while. And it was really, really important too. So Kevin just wasn't wore out, so he didn't lose his spirit for Harry. And that's a tribute to the makeup also.
Well, I think it's the fact that I've been in suits myself, and I know what it's like being on the other side. A funny story about that. The scene where Harry goes out of the kitchen and comes back with the deer head, the stuffed deer head. We had a number of suits for Kevin, and one day I just thought, I think it'd be funny for me to put on the Harry suit, and Kevin was going to walk out of the shot and go around the corner and come back with the deer head. But when he comes back with the deer head, it would be like movies, it would not be this big, I just thought it would be a good laugh of the day. So I put the suit on and do that. And Kevin walks around. Kevin was in on this. Kevin walks around. I come back out like this. That's the day Steven Spielberg shows up on the set. And it happens to be right then when I come around the corner, I'm hearing this deer head, and Steven kind of goes, what the?
It felt like in the early 80s, when there was sort of the rise of practical makeup and the character effects really began to kick in, a lot of it was horror driven at first. This felt like a real shift, and then a lot of the work you did after that with Eddie Murphy and with Mighty Joe Young and things like that, you really got away from straight horror. And I feel like that was important in terms of people understanding that this isn't just about scares, that you can create characters, you can create real identities for them. Was that something you were actively looking for in terms of the scripts that you were reading? You wanted things where you could stretch what you did?
Well, I do want to create characters. That's it's so much of why I wanted to do this. It wasn't just to scare people, which I like doing, and I actually quite like horror movies, but I like kind of character-driven horror movies, more like the old school things, Frankenstein, and Hunchback of Notre Dame and stuff. And there were characters that make up so much a part of it, and that's why I always wanted to do that. And that's what I so enjoyed when we were doing the animatronic stuff, which is pretty much dead these days, was that we were part of that performance and part of making that character in a way that it wasn't just the look of it, but you actually performed it, and it was, it's part of what I love about what I do, and it's the same thing about just in the design and sculpting. I thought a lot about the performance and the character when I was doing the sculpture, and thought about the expressions that he was going to make and how the mechanism was going to work, and knowing the materials and how they react. There's so many wrinkles in Harry that are put in very specific places so I could give the expressions I wanted. He's sculpted with. I always thought, there was a sadness to Harry, being Bigfoot in the woods, basically alone. But you find out at the end of the movie he's not. With that freakishly little one. But he's sculpted with these kind of already kind of slightly sad brows and these wrinkles that would give him character, and also work for the performance of it and the mechanism also.
It's interesting because until the beginning of this, when we were seeing the slides before the film, I'd forgotten the trading cards, and then we saw some of them show up here that were used, and it seems like if this was made today, Universal would absolutely have stuffed Harrys in stores before the movie hit shelves. Was there talk about doing more with Harry? Was it contingent upon the performance of the film? It seems like it's so backwards the way it's driven today. It's all merchandising first, whether people have seen the movie or like the movie or not. So were there conversations about maybe getting Harry into people's hands?
Not beforehand. I think that, and I was guilty and Rick is totally not a part of this guilt. I'm as guilty as everybody was at the time at Amblin. I think we consciously made what we called the ET decision, because we just just post ET by a couple of years, and where we weren't going to show the creature. We were not going to show the creature, and for some reason, we didn't. The creature wasn't even in the trailers. Harry was not in the trailers. We alluded to
Trailer's
it.
bad too.
Oh, yeah.
Why would you want to go see this movie?
Yeah,
Just
that's
around
what the
vacation.
trailers were like. And, had we shown Harry the trailers, and I'm not saying I advocate, bringing a bunch of product before the movie. I think they surely would have done that in these days. But I think that, again, it was a mistake we made, and only in retrospect did we, learn that we paid the price for it. But had we made better trailers, had we shown Harry in the trailers, had we shown people what they got, I remember the same day we opened, the Untouchables opened, and one of the people on the Untouchables was over. He said, yeah, we were really afraid that you guys were just going to dominate that weekend, and our movie was going to die. And then we saw your poster, we thought we were okay.
Oh.
Well, if they made the trailer today, they'd show the whole movie though.
They would show the whole movie, yes, they would
You
show
see
the whole
trailers today, and they show the whole damn movie. It's like they give everything away.
And it's finding that balancing act that I think is the hardest thing, because Harry, it really was a case. I worked in the theater that summer, and I remember watching the closing credits is very nostalgic for me, because I think I cleaned the theater every single time. So I've seen, if nothing else, the closing credits 300 times. But it's one of those things where anybody who saw it got really enthusiastic and excited about it. But it was a hard film to get people into precisely because of that, because they didn't know who he was. And I think that's that fine line. It really feels though like the film has endured, and like people rediscover it. And I brought my kids for the first time tonight to see it, and it's great to see that it plays. It's still a movie that there's nothing about it that it feels dated or aged. And not every movie from the 80s is that way. So I think it's a real testament to what you guys did back then.
Something I've noticed, and this is again testament to Rick, is Rick has forever since that moment sort of defined the Bigfoot until either a real one's found or something. Because you look at an airport magazine, you can get a Bigfoot for your lawn, you can get it's just 2 millimeters short of a copyright lawsuit. But I mean, Rick's Harry is Harry. I mean that is the new definition of a Bigfoot. I saw Bigfoot jerky. And I have photos on my phone of it. It was in a store, Bigfoot jerky, and it would, in other jerky would come in mild and spicy. This came in happy and angry. And it had a drawing of Harry, just slightly copyright-free of Rick's, smiling on the one jerky. And I see the Oregon jerky, they were like salami meat sticks, but they were, you could buy them real angry too, like the angry drawing. So, I mean, he has forever defined what the Bigfoot is. I mean, so that's kind of nice. I mean, I still believe that the creature could exist. I hope he exists. I hope he likes the movie. Yeah. So.
I really am thrilled to have you here to see the film. Do you hear from people that have grown up with the movie or have seen the movie over time? Is it something that you get a sense has kind of endured and penetrated and gotten through to people?
Yeah, I get a lot on my movies. They say, God, when I was a little kid, that was my favorite movie, and I feel really old. I'm so grateful they feel that way. But no, I think, it's, as a filmmaker, if you can get a few films over the course of your career where people will actually remember your film, and I just thank my lucky stars when they say, what have you done? I don't say Fighting Ninjas 7. I can say Harry and the Hendersons quite proudly, very proudly.
With John Lithgow, I think he is a really important piece of that puzzle. There's something great about the way John can go right over the top and still give it a heart that's very grounded. Very few people, I think, can pull off what he can. Was he your first choice? Was he somebody that you came to over the course of the process? And in terms of working with him, was there a time to get used to working with Harry, or did he just jump right in and start working with you guys immediately?
He was my first choice, but he didn't want to do it. He also had just come off 2 very serious Academy Award nominations, Garp and Terms of Endearment, and he just did not want to do this, and we really had to do a lot of convincing. Stephen had to do a lot of convincing, and finally we got him. And again, I was fighting in the studio because they wanted Danny DeVito because he was like 2 foot tall. and then John, I think it's great you asked that, because John, very cautious of maintaining his image, he really, I think when he saw Rick's design, when we first brought John to Rick's shop and he saw the creature, then everything was okay, it was gonna be okay. But I remember one day on the set, and I was asking him to do something, and he took me aside, John, and he said, Bill, you're asking me to be too broad. I really feel uncomfortable being this broad. I said, John, your co-star is 8.5 feet tall, covered with hair. I don't think you can be too broad. And then John goes on to win like 4 or 5 Emmys for, eating every piece of scenery, 40, Fourth Planet from the Sun 5 years in a row. He just like, wow, won the Emmy, And I'm thinking to myself, is John being too broad? No, he was our first choice, but because he brought such integrity to the story. The character opposite Harry could not be a buffoon. He had to be a conflicted guy, and a guy able to show the conflict.
That's what I love. I think the casting of Lithgow and Linda Dillon, I mean, these are great, meaty 70s actors, the way I think of their start and what they did originally. So they really ground it, and they make you believe that they believe this thing.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, we enjoy watching the dailies and just watching John. It was funny, when I was in New York recently, when we were filming Man in Black 3, and I walked to the Natural History Museum. I'm walking back to the place where I was staying, and I saw a couple people walking towards me with really silly hats on. And I was trying to avoid eye contact with them because they looked a little crazy. And then the guy in the silly hat goes, Rick! And I look, and it's John Lithgow. So he wasn't afraid of being too broad.
One of the highest compliments I can pay you, Rick, is that when I was at the studio and the Harry that you have in the showroom, he still looks real. He still looks alive. Like getting that close to him and seeing the artistry of the sculpt and how you created him, it's remarkable. It really, even 25 years later, I think it's one of the great sculpts in film. So thank you for being here tonight. And as a real sign of just how deeply this film has landed for people, we have something special that was prepared by David Fine for us tonight. There was an episode of 30 Rock where they paid tribute to Harry and the Hendersons, and he has trimmed it down to about 7.5 minutes, so we just get the Harry and the Hendersons highlights. But I think you'll see, for somebody, this really got in there and really stuck, and it's a lovely tribute to the work you guys did, and so is this audience being here tonight. Thank you guys very much for coming out. And thank you, Taylor, for putting this together. It's really a tremendous honor to see the two of you here.
Thank you both for being an opportunity.
Thank you for doing it. It would have existed without you, I'd have been there with an old gorilla suit and Danny DeVito.